The night they left Daisy on the side of the highway, something inside me broke. Not quietly, not gently. It shattered like glass under boots. You think you know what betrayal feels like until you see your old dog's collar lying in the dirt, her tag still warm from the neck it used to touch. That's when you understand what cruelty really looks like. I had begged them not to take her. "She's old," I'd said. "She doesn't like long car rides. I'll keep her here. She's my company." But my son, Mark, had that cold voice of practicality he'd learned from his wife. "Mom, it's too much work. We can't bring a dog to California. We're already dealing with the move. Just let her go." Let her go. As if she were a broken chair or a useless box of clothes. Not the creature who'd slept beside me through widowed nights, who'd licked my tears when grief was still raw. That morning, they'd loaded everything into the moving van, boxes labeled kitchen, garage, Mark's office. The house looked hollow, like a body missing its soul. Daisy kept pacing between the door and the driveway, tail wagging nervously, sensing the change. She always knew. When I noticed her leash missing from the hook, I asked, "Where's Daisy?" "Oh, she's with us," said Claire, my daughter-in-law, without meeting my eyes. I should have known by her tone, too light, too rehearsed. By noon they were gone, the truck rumbling down the street, leaving me in a house that smelled of dust and old memories. It wasn't until sunset that I heard the scratching at the porch door. Weak, uneven. My heart sank. I opened it and saw her, Daisy, trembling, covered in road dust, one paw bleeding. She had walked miles, God knows how many, to come back home. Her eyes met mine, apologetic, as if she were the one who'd done something wrong. I fell to my knees and held her, my tears mixing with the dirt on her fur. "Oh, baby girl, what did they do to you?" That night I didn't sleep. I cleaned her wounds, fed her small bites of chicken, whispered promises into her ears. "You're home now. No one's taking you again." But deep inside, another promise was forming. One not made out loud. If they could abandon her, they could abandon me, and I wasn't going to wait for that day to come. The next morning, I called Mark. "She came back," I said. My voice was shaking with anger I could barely contain. "What, Mom? That's impossible." "Impossible? She walked here, bleeding, alone." He sighed. That heavy, patronizing sigh people use when they think you're old and dramatic. "Mom, we didn't have a choice. She's old. She wouldn't survive the move." "She almost didn't survive you," I snapped. "Mom, don't start." But I had already started. I just didn't finish it then. For a week, I fed Daisy medicine for the infection in her paw and let her sleep beside me on the couch. Each time I stroked her fur, the anger hardened into something sharp and steady. They had left her, and by doing that, they had shown me exactly how they'd treat me when I became inconvenient. 2 weeks later, Claire sent me a text. "Hope Daisy's doing okay. We're settling in. Boo. Have you decided what you'll do with the house yet?" The house? Of course. The real reason for their sudden concern. The property I'd owned for 42 years. The one I'd worked 2 jobs to pay off after their father died. They'd been hinting for months about downsizing, about retirement communities. Now they were hundreds of miles away, but still circling the carcass like vultures. I wrote back one word, thinking. But what I was really thinking about was revenge. Not the loud kind, not the screaming and breaking things kind. I wanted something quieter, colder, something that would echo in their perfect suburban lives long after I was gone. That weekend, I drove Daisy to the vet. The doctor looked at her and said softly, "She's lucky she found her way home." "So am I said, because now I know exactly who my family is. I started sorting papers that night. The deed, the insurance policies, my will. Every envelope held memories. The mortgage bills Andrew and I used to pay on the kitchen counter, the letters from the bank when times were hard, the note he'd written on the first page of our joint savings book. For the future, for the kids. I smiled bitterly. What future? They'd trade loyalty for convenience any day. 2 weeks later, I went to see my lawyer, Mr. Dalton. He'd been handling my estate since Andrew passed. "I'd like to make some changes to the will," I said. He adjusted his glasses. "Of course, Mrs. Joe. What kind of changes?" "I want to remove my son as beneficiary." He hesitated. "May I ask why?" "Because I finally realized who deserves what." Mr. Dalton nodded slowly, perhaps sensing the story behind my calm voice. "Do you have someone else in mind?" "Yes," I said, smiling faintly. "I do." Outside, the autumn wind rustled the trees, scattering yellow leaves across the parking lot. I could almost hear Daisy's collar jingling behind me as I walked to the car. For the first time in months, I felt light, not happy, but free. That night, I sat by the fireplace, Daisy's head resting on my lap. The room glowed in orange light, flickering over the family photos on the mantel. I looked at Mark's wedding picture, him in that gray suit, Claire clutching his arm like a trophy. And I didn't feel sadness anymore, just clarity. "They left you on the road, Daisy," I whispered, running my fingers through her fur. "But we're not the ones who'll be lost in the end." When the phone rang again the next day, I let it ring. I already knew what they wanted. Updates, reassurance, maybe control. But they wouldn't find any of that here anymore, because Granny Joe had a plan, and for once in my life, I wasn't going to be the one left behind. When the letter came from Mark a month later, it wasn't love. It was paperwork. A neat printed envelope with his new return address in San Diego and a short note written by Claire's hand, all curls and superiority. "Mom, hope you're doing well. We're thinking of visiting in the spring. Maybe we could finally discuss your property situation. San Diego is pricey, and investing smartly could help everyone. Love, Mark and Claire. Help everyone." Their favorite phrase, meaning help them. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and set it beside the coffee mug Daisy was sniffing. "They think I'm still the same fool, Daisy," I whispered. But they forgot I was the one who taught them how to hold a pen. I didn't answer the letter. Instead, I called someone else, Mr. Dalton again. "Do you still have that contact from the Animal Foundation, the one that rescues older dogs?" He paused, recognizing the steel in my tone. "Yes, I do. You want to donate again?" "Not quite. I want to talk business." The following week, a woman named Hannah Miller came by. She looked about 40, with sharp eyes softened by the kind of warmth that only comes from loving creatures who can't speak for themselves. Daisy took to her immediately, which told me everything I needed to know. "Mrs. Joe," Hannah said, sitting on the porch swing with me, "your lawyer mentioned you wanted to discuss something about your property." "Yes, I've been thinking of selling, but not to just anyone. I wanted to go somewhere that matters." Her brow lifted slightly. "Matters how?" I looked out at my yard, the lilac bushes Andrew planted decades ago, the weathered barn where Daisy sometimes slept when she wanted to feel useful guarding something. This land has seen enough loyalty to know the difference between love and convenience. I want it to keep giving, even after I'm gone. Hannah nodded slowly. "You mean a sanctuary?" "Exactly," I said. That evening, she toured the property. Daisy followed her the entire time, tail wagging, as if blessing every corner of soil with her approval. When they came back, Hannah's eyes glimmered. This would be perfect. Enough space for rehabilitation runs, kennels, even a small vet clinic if we get proper funding. "How much can your organization afford?" I asked quietly. "To buy this much land? Nothing close to market value. We usually rent or receive donations." I smiled faintly. "Good, because I'm not selling it for market value. I'm giving it to you." She blinked, stunned. "Mrs. Joe, that's an entire property. It's just wood and walls. What matters is who breathes inside them." For the first time in months, the air around me felt light, alive again. Daisy barked softly as if agreeing, curling up beside my feet. That night, I wrote my son another letter, not out of bitterness, but precision. Dear Mark, you once said California was too expensive. That's true. Life always is when you think only in numbers. I've decided to sell the house. You don't need to worry about maintenance anymore. By the time you read this, the papers will be signed. Take care of yourselves. Mom. The next day, I signed the deed. Joe's Haven Animal Sanctuary. That was the name Hannah suggested, but I saw something deeper in it. It wasn't just a name, it was a statement. 2 weeks later, the moving truck arrived. Not for me this time, but for the animals. I helped them carry in kennels, blankets, toys. The empty rooms filled again, not with the cold voices of family who measured love in dollars, but with soft whimpers and curious paws. Dogs rescued from highways, cages, abandonment, all now sleeping under the same roof that had once been my prison of loneliness. Every sound healed something in me. The scratching of claws on hardwood, the snoring of tired bodies, the soft sigh of Daisy when she realized she finally belonged. I was sitting on the porch swing when the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Mom, what did you do? Claire's brother sent us a link. The county registry shows the house sold for $1 to some animal charity? I could almost hear Claire's outrage in the background. Tell her she's lost her mind. Mark's voice cracked with frustration. Why would you give away everything? Because, I said quietly, I learned that home isn't about walls or deeds. It's about who comes back when they're left behind. Daisy came back. You didn't. He was silent. I could feel the weight of my words sinking in. Mom, we didn't mean... You meant exactly what you did, Mark. Don't worry, you'll land on your feet. You always do. Are you punishing us? No, I said softly. I'm remembering myself. When I hung up, I didn't cry. The porch light glowed warm against the evening dark, and Daisy leaned her head on my knee. The sanctuary lights twinkled across the yard, each window alive with second chances. Hannah came out holding 2 mugs of tea. You sure about all this, Joe? It's a big change. I've been sure since the day they left her on the road, I said. They lost their inheritance. I found my purpose. We sat there, watching the dogs play under the stars. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train hummed, a low, lonely sound that used to make me ache. Tonight it sounded like freedom, and as the night air wrapped around me, Daisy lifted her head and gave one last gentle bark, as if saying, You did good, Mom. I smiled, feeling the warmth rise in my chest. This is home now, I whispered, but deep down, I knew the story wasn't over, because one day soon, my son would come back. Not for love, but for the fight he thought he could still win. And when he did, Granny Joe would be ready. You can always tell when trouble's coming. It doesn't arrive quietly. It hums through the air like static before a storm, unsettling the birds, even the dogs. That morning, I woke up to Daisy growling softly at the window. 2 cars were pulling into the driveway, sleek, polished, expensive. One was my son's. The other, I'd soon learn, belonged to his lawyer. Stay here, girl, I told Daisy, though she was already pressed against my leg. She could sense it, the same way she had sensed that cold goodbye months ago when they'd driven away without her. When Mark stepped out of the car, he didn't look like my boy anymore. The boy who once built blanket forts in the living room, who used to hold my hand when thunderstorms scared him. He looked like a stranger wearing my son's face, jaw tight, tie too perfect, eyes avoiding mine. Mom, he said flatly, we need to talk. Beside him stood a man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase like a weapon. He didn't even introduce himself before pulling out a stack of papers. Mrs. Joe, I'm here on behalf of your son and daughter-in-law. We're contesting the recent transfer of your property. Contesting, I repeated. My voice was calm, but inside me, something flickered, half rage, half heartbreak. Yes, Mark interrupted. You weren't in your right mind when you gave that house away. Claire and I have been worried about you for a while. You've been emotional. I almost laughed. Emotional. That word men use when women stop letting themselves be walked over. I leaned against the porch rail, arms crossed. Emotional enough to finally see the truth, you mean? Mom, Mark said, lowering his voice as if he were being kind. We don't want to fight, but this isn't normal. You donated an entire property worth $500,000 to strangers, and we're your family. I looked past him at the sanctuary grounds. The morning sun was spilling over the kennels, and the dogs were already playing, tails wagging in the dew. Hannah was in the yard laughing as she poured kibble into metal bowls. The sound carried like music. Those strangers, I said quietly, visit me every morning. They wag their tails. They listen. They never lie to me. Mom, come on, this is serious. So is betrayal, Mark. He rubbed his temples. Claire says this is your grief talking, that you're still not over Dad. It was such a cheap shot that I actually smiled. Your father would have called that manipulation, not concern. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Joe, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to pursue legal channels. The court may determine you were coerced into signing. Coerced? I raised an eyebrow. By whom? The dogs? He looked uncomfortable, flipping through his papers. You don't have a history of large donations. It raises questions about your mental state. That did it. The fury that had been sleeping inside me since that night Daisy limped home began to wake. Let me tell you something about my mental state, I said, stepping closer. I remember every detail of the day I brought Mark Joseph home from the hospital. I remember every lunch I skipped so I could pay for his braces. I remember how his father and I spent 40 years building a house from nothing, brick by brick, with our hands. And I remember watching that same son drive away, leaving behind the one creature who'd never stopped loving him. So yes, gentlemen, I am perfectly sane. Mark's expression faltered for the first time. Mom, we just thought. You thought wrong, I cut in. You thought love had a price tag. You thought an old woman wouldn't notice being replaced. But the thing about getting older, Mark, is you stop mistaking selfishness for love. The lawyer coughed politely. We'll, be in touch. Please do, I said, smiling thinly. Bring biscuits next time. The dogs like visitors. They left without another word. I stood there watching the dust from their tires fade down the road, feeling both heavier and lighter than I had in years. When I turned around, Hannah was standing in the doorway, her face pale. Joe, are you okay? I'm fine, I said, though my hands were trembling slightly. They'll try to fight it. But this house doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to something bigger. She nodded, understanding. We'll protect it. Later that afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with Daisy asleep beside my feet. On the counter sat the same old recipe box I'd used since Andrew was alive, the one filled with every note and meal we'd ever shared. I pulled out a blank card and began to write. Not a recipe this time, but a record. If anyone ever asks why I gave everything away, I wrote, tell them it was because the ones I fed forgot to say thank you, but the ones I rescued never forgot who fed them. I tucked the card inside the box, right between chicken soup, Andrew's favorite, and apple pie, Mark's birthday. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the court. I could tell by the thick envelope and the seal that they'd gone through with it. A lawsuit. My own son suing me. Hannah read it first, her eyes darting across the page. They're claiming you were unfit to make financial decisions. I nodded slowly. Good. Let them try. The judge will love the story about a son who abandoned a dog and came back for the house. Hannah hesitated. Do you want me to contact the press? We could make this public. Animal welfare stories get attention. I smiled, a sly, tired smile that felt more like myself than anything else. Not yet. Let him underestimate me one more time. That evening, as I watched the sunset spill over the fields, Daisy rested her head on my lap again. The orange light made her fur shine like gold. I stroked her ears and whispered, they think I'm fighting alone. They don't know I've got a pack now. The wind rustled through the trees like quiet applause. Somewhere behind the kennels, the dogs began to bark, a chorus of loyalty echoing against the hills. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. If they wanted a war over what love was worth, Granny Jo was going to give them a lesson they'd never forget. You don't forget the sound of your name echoing in a courtroom. Mrs. Joanna Lee Johnson? It's cold, impersonal, like you're just another case file, not a woman whose life is being dissected by strangers in suits. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking a little, Daisy's worn collar charm hanging from my wrist like a medal. The bailiff held the door open, and I walked into the room where my own son was trying to take back what he had thrown away. Mark was already there. Sitting straight-backed beside his lawyer, he looked like every executive I'd seen on the news. Confident, sleek, rehearsed. But when his eyes met mine, I saw something underneath the polish. Shame. Small, trembling shame that he tried to hide behind paperwork and signatures. Claire wasn't with him this time. Maybe her conscience couldn't handle fluorescent lights and truth at the same time. "Mrs. Johnson," said the judge, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, "we're here regarding the property transfer to Joe's Haven Animal Sanctuary. Your son alleges you were coerced or mentally unfit at the time of signing. How do you plead?" I could have stayed quiet, let my lawyer handle it. But I'd lived 74 years learning when silence helps and when it betrays you. "I plead perfectly capable, Your Honor," I said clearly, "and perfectly aware of what betrayal looks like when it's dressed as concern." There was a murmur in the room, the kind of low buzz people make when they realize the old lady on the stand isn't here to apologize. My lawyer, a patient man named Harold, stood. "Your Honor, we have documentation proving Mrs. Johnson's mental clarity, medical reports, financial records, and witness statements from both her doctor and the foundation staff." The judge nodded. "Noted." Mark's attorney stood next. "Your Honor, while we respect Mrs. Johnson's independence, we believe emotional distress caused by grief impaired her judgment. We have evidence she was exhibiting signs of confusion, talking to her deceased husband, isolating herself, showing irrational generosity." I couldn't help but laugh. It burst out before I could stop it, sharp and raw. Irrational generosity? Is that what you call compassion these days? "Mrs. Johnson," the judge said gently, "please let him finish." "Of course," I said. "But may I remind the court, my supposed confusion also included balancing 30 years of mortgage payments and raising a son who now calls love irrational." The lawyer cleared his throat, flustered. "Your Honor, as you can see, she's emotional." "And articulate," the judge interrupted. "Continue." He shuffled his notes. "We'd like to call the son to the stand." Mark rose, buttoning his suit jacket, and walked forward. For a second, I saw him at 10 years old again, knees scraped, holding up a drawing of a dog he wanted for Christmas. Then I blinked, and he was the man who left my Daisy to die. "Mr. Johnson," said the lawyer, "tell the court why you're concerned." Mark looked straight ahead. "I love my mother, I really do. But after my father died, she became different, obsessed with the dog, isolated from family. She stopped answering calls. And then one day, she gave away her entire property. It didn't make sense. We were worried." I stood up before my lawyer could stop me. "You were worried about the property, not me." The judge tilted her head. "Mrs. Johnson—" "No, Your Honor, please. Let me say this. My son says I became different after my husband died. He's right. I did. I stopped waiting for phone calls that never came. I stopped cooking Sunday dinners for people who forgot to show up. And when they left my dog on the side of the highway, I stopped believing blood automatically means family." The courtroom went quiet. Even the judge didn't interrupt. I turned toward Mark. "You want to talk about obsession? Let's talk about the night Daisy walked home bleeding. Do you remember that? Or were you too busy packing boxes for your new life?" His lips parted, but no words came out. The judge leaned forward. "Is this true, Mr. Johnson?" Mark's lawyer tried to object, but Mark's silence said enough. Finally, he muttered, "We didn't think the dog would what?" I said softly. "Survive?" The judge cleared her throat. "Mrs. Johnson, please return to your seat." I nodded and sat, hands trembling just slightly. Harold whispered, "You're doing fine." When it was time for the defense, Hannah from the sanctuary took the stand. She wore jeans and a clean white shirt, simple, sincere, unpolished. "Your Honor," she said, "I met Mrs. Johnson months ago. She wasn't confused. She was purposeful. She said, and I quote, 'I'm giving my home to those who understand loyalty better than people do.' We didn't coerce her. We thanked her." The judge nodded slowly, jotting something down. "Thank you, Ms. Miller." After that, the courtroom felt different. The energy shifted, less like a battle, more like an inevitable ending. Even Mark's lawyer stopped pushing so hard. When the judge finally called for a recess, I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face like truth. Mark followed me into the hallway. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Mom, why are you doing this? We're your family." I looked at him, really looked at him. The expensive watch, the polished shoes, the desperate eyes. "Family is what you protect, Mark, not what you abandon." He swallowed. "I made a mistake." "Yes," I said, "and now you're learning what it feels like when the person you take for granted stops forgiving you." He rubbed his forehead. "I thought you'd leave the house to me. I thought you'd never leave Daisy on the road. We were both wrong." When court resumed, the judge took less than 5 minutes to make her decision. Based on the testimony and documentation, I see no evidence of coercion or incompetence. The donation stands. Joe's Haven Animal Sanctuary retains ownership of the property. Her gavel hit the desk, and the sound felt like thunder rolling through my bones. I didn't look at Mark when it was over. I just gathered Daisy's collar and walked out, each step lighter than the one before. Outside, Hannah was waiting, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Joe." "No," I said softly. "We did, and they'll never understand why." That evening, as the sanctuary lights came on, I sat in my rocking chair on the porch. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and red, and I thought about all the colors of love, the easy ones, the painful ones, the kind that demands you choose between forgiveness and freedom. Daisy's collar jingled softly against my wrist as I whispered, "We're safe now, girl, finally safe." But deep down, I knew something still lingered, because people like Claire don't disappear quietly. And the silence before the next storm is always the loudest. It started 3 months after the trial, just when I began to think peace might finally stay. The sanctuary had grown. 6 new dogs rescued from a hoarder's house, 3 cats who thought they were dogs, and 1 blind golden retriever who followed me everywhere like a shadow. Every morning smelled of coffee, wet grass, and second chances. Then came the black SUV. I saw it from the porch before I even heard the tires on gravel. The car door opened and out stepped Claire. Immaculate as ever, wrapped in money and perfume, her hair shining like she'd been waiting for a camera to find her. Daisy growled low, the kind of sound she only made when memory hurt. "Relax, girl," I murmured, though my stomach had already turned to ice. "Let's see what the devil's selling today." "Mother Joe," she said sweetly, using the title she reserved for performances. You look expensive," I said. "That's never the same thing." Her smile didn't flinch. She glanced around the property, the kennels, the fenced fields, the small cottage where Hannah had moved in to help full-time. "So this is the empire, huh? You've been busy." "I don't build empires, Claire. I build homes." She laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Cute. You always had a flair for drama. Is that what you came here for? A review?" "Actually," she said, stepping closer, heels clicking on the porch, "I came with an offer, one that could fix everything between us." I didn't invite her to sit, but she did anyway, crossing her legs like she was still in control. "A developer reached out to Mark's firm," she began. "They're expanding the highway. They want this land, and they're offering $3 million. I didn't blink. "Then they can keep their money." She leaned forward, her perfume too sweet, too loud. "Don't be foolish, Joe. Think of what you could do. Upgrade this place, move the animals to a bigger property, live comfortably for the rest of your life." "Comfort," I said, "isn't the same as peace. I already have one. Don't need the other." Her voice hardened. "You're making decisions out of spite." "No," I said quietly. "I'm making them out of clarity. Spite would have been selling this land to the highest bidder and sending you a postcard." Her mask slipped for a moment. I saw the cold calculation flicker behind her smile. "You don't understand, do you? You're sitting on land that's about to triple in value. Do you have any idea what kind of opportunity this is?" "I do," I said. "It's the kind where greedy people line their pockets while good things die under bulldozers." Claire stood abruptly. "You've always been impossible." "Better impossible than hollow." She took a slow breath, composing herself. "You're old, Joe. You won't be around forever. What happens when you die? The sanctuary goes bankrupt? The animals end up euthanized? That's your legacy?" That one landed. It hit the soft place in me I tried to keep armored, the part that still feared endings. I looked past her to the field where Hannah was tossing a ball for the dogs, the laughter in the distance, the soft yelps of joy, the sun turning the grass gold. "No," I said finally, "that's your kind of legacy. Mine's already alive." For a moment, Claire said nothing. Then she smiled, slow, poisonous. "You think you've won, don't you? That a few stray dogs make you a saint?" "I don't need sainthood," I said. "Just a clean conscience." She turned, heels stabbing the dirt. "You'll regret this. Mark wanted to handle things peacefully. I told him that wouldn't work with someone like you." I felt Daisy press against my knee, sensing the tension. "Tell Mark I stopped being someone he could handle the day he left a bleeding dog on a highway." Claire's lips curled into a smirk. "You're sentimental, Joe. That's your weakness." "No," I said, standing slowly, meeting her eyes. "It's my weapon." She froze, just for a second, then stormed toward the SUV. The tires kicked up gravel as she sped away, but the dust she left behind wasn't as thick as the feeling in my chest, the certainty that this wasn't over. That night, Hannah found me sitting by the window, the moonlight falling across the old wooden table, where I kept Andrew's photo and Daisy's leash. "She'll come back," Hannah said quietly. "I know." "She's dangerous." "So am I said softly, without looking away from the glass. The next morning, the letters started coming. City inspectors, noise complaints, health department notices. Every week, a new one. Someone reporting that the sanctuary was unsanitary, that dogs barked too late, that zoning laws were being violated. Every single complaint anonymous, every single one traced to the same address. Mark and Claire Johnson, San Diego. Hannah slammed one of the envelopes down on the table. "They're trying to shut us down." "Let them try," I said. "We've got truth on our side. They've just got money. And money," I smiled, "runs out." But inside, I knew this war wasn't about money anymore. It was about pride. Their need to prove that love couldn't outlast greed. That night, as I lay awake listening to the soft breathing of dogs around the house, I made a decision. If they wanted to drag me into another battle, I wouldn't just defend myself this time. I'd expose them. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. My late husband's old friend, Dean Willis, now a senior reporter for the Denver Post. "Dean, it's Joe," I said when he answered. "Joe, my God, it's been decades. How are you?" "Busy, and I've got a story for you, about a son who sued his mother, a daughter-in-law who tried to silence an animal sanctuary, and a little dog who survived both of them." He chuckled softly, then paused, realizing I was serious. "You're not joking." "Not even close." "Well," he said, "this sounds like front-page material." "Good," I said, my voice steady, because it's time people know that cruelty doesn't always wear a stranger's face. Sometimes it wears a family name. As I hung up, Daisy nudged my hand, her old eyes full of understanding. I scratched her behind the ears and whispered, "We're not just saving animals anymore, girl. We're saving souls, even if it means burning a few lies to the ground." The next day, the reporter's car pulled into the drive. The storm was coming again, but this time, it was my thunder. When the story broke, it didn't just make the local section. It hit the front page. The headline stretched bold and merciless across the morning paper, like a judgment written in ink. A son sued his mother. She responded by saving 42 dogs. Hannah burst into my kitchen holding 3 copies, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Joe, we're everywhere. Look, Denver, Phoenix, even a blog in California picked it up." I didn't reach for the paper right away. My hands were still wrapped around my mug of coffee, the one with the chip Daisy once gnawed as a puppy. "Read it to me," I said quietly. She started. When 74-year-old widow Joanna, Granny Joe Johnson's son, sued her for donating her home to an animal sanctuary, she didn't fight for money. She fought for love. Now, Joe's Haven shelters over 40 rescued animals, and her courage has inspired a wave of donations across the country. She looked up, her voice trembling. "Joe, they wrote about you like a hero." I smiled faintly. "Heroes don't bleed less, honey. They just keep walking." Outside, volunteers were unloading new supplies that had arrived since the article went online. Bags of food, blankets, even a new water pump. Someone had sent a handwritten note taped to a box. For Daisy and every soul she brought home. The sanctuary buzzed with life that morning. The barking didn't sound like noise anymore. It sounded like a choir. By noon, my phone started ringing nonstop. Local news stations, donors, even strangers who wanted to visit. But one call froze me. "Mom," Mark's voice said softly. I didn't answer right away. He cleared his throat. "I saw the article." "I figured you would," I said. "Claire's furious," he continued. "She says you humiliated us." "You humiliated yourselves," I said simply. "I just told the truth." There was silence on the line. Then a breath. "Mom, they fired me." I closed my eyes. "Because of the lawsuit?" "Because of the publicity. The firm said it made them look heartless. They're right, I guess." He gave a short, bitter laugh that cracked halfway. "I don't know what to do." "You start over," I said. "It's what grown-ups do when they ruin something worth keeping." "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "No one ever does." For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice smaller than I remembered, he said, "I saw the photo of Daisy. She looks old." "She's happy," I whispered. "That's all that matters." "I'm sorry, Mom." 3 words I'd stopped expecting years ago. They hit me harder than any courtroom verdict. "Come by sometime," I said finally. "Not to talk business, just to meet the dogs. Bring yourself, not your lawyer." He hesitated, then said softly, "Okay." After I hung up, I sat on the porch, staring at the wide sky. Daisy limped out and lay her head in my lap. The wind smelled like hay and freedom. For the first time in a long while, I felt something deep, quiet and clean. Forgiveness. 2 days later, he came. No fancy car this time, no suit, just Mark, standing awkwardly at the gate with his hands in his pockets. The dogs barked, but Daisy trotted forward, tail wagging slow and unsure. He knelt down. "Hey, girl." His voice broke. "You remember me?" She sniffed his hand, then leaned against him, hesitant, but willing. He started crying, right there on the dirt. I let him. Some lessons don't need words. When he finally looked up, his eyes met mine. "Can I help?" "Grab a shovel," I said. "Kennel 3 needs fixing." He laughed through the tears. "You're really not going to make this easy, are you?" "Nothing worth fixing ever is." We worked in silence most of the afternoon, patching fences, cleaning runs, mending things that had been broken too long. When we stopped, the sun was low, and Hannah brought us lemonade. Mark sat on the porch step watching the dogs chase each other through the tall grass. "They look happy," he said. "They are," I answered. He hesitated, then added, "You know, I used to think success was money, houses, titles. But standing here, I think maybe it's this, seeing something alive because you cared enough not to quit." I nodded. "Your father would have liked to hear you say that." For the first time, he smiled. Not the polite smile of a man pretending, but the soft, tired smile of a boy who finally found home again. The weeks that followed blurred into work and laughter. The donations poured in, enough to build new kennels, a vet room, and even a small education center we named the Daisy Wing. Visitors came from all over, wanting to meet the old woman who gave up everything to protect the forgotten. I never felt poor. I felt rich in ways the bank could never count. One evening, I sat on the porch with Hannah and Mark, watching the sunset burn the sky pink and gold. The air smelled like hay, coffee, and a hint of peace. "You ever regret it, Joe?" Hannah asked softly. "Giving them the house?" I looked around, the sanctuary glowing in the fading light, the laughter of volunteers, Daisy snoring beside my chair. "Every day," I said with a grin. "Regret that I didn't do it sooner." They laughed, and for a moment, everything felt exactly as it should. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the quiet yard, the stars hanging heavy above me. I could almost hear Andrew's voice in the wind, low and steady. "You did good, Joe. You found the right way home." I smiled, tears sliding down my cheeks. "We did, love. We did." Daisy nudged my hand one last time and settled at my feet. The moonlight shimmered on her white muzzle, and I whispered, "We saved each other, didn't we?" Her tail thumped once. In that stillness, I realized revenge hadn't been the point at all. It was redemption, not just mine, but my son's, the animals, even Daisy's. We'd all found a way back from the side of the road, and as the wind moved through the trees, soft and forgiving, I knew the truth of it at last. They left me with nothing but an old dog, and she led me to everything that mattered. The end.